So this is the job that we're going to be looking at. Now we've got the repair here and we're going to be blending into this little edge on the quarter panel just so we can help match the colouring a little bit better. But the main part's going to be on the back door, hence why I've got the little blend section masked off at the moment. So first we're going to deal with the back door itself. Now with it being a lot warmer at the moment, we're going to use a wet bed. Now wet bed is a clear base coat binder. It's not clear coat, it is clear base coat. It's added to a lot of silvers and every scheme has one of these, whether it's a water base or whether it's a solvent based scheme. Now I'm going to be using the BELLLARIA, and what we're going to do is just put one nice light coat across the whole of the back of this door, just to help, one, to cover up some of the prep scratches, and two, this will help your metallics land a lot better. So this Volkswagen is LA7W Reflex Silver. It is a common problem silver because if you're not careful it can go too dark and your metallics won't lay down very well. So this is the application of the wet bed. Now this is just clear base coat, so it's not going to alter the colour of the panel at all if you go right up to the edge, and it's just going to help everything lay down better. It's going to, especially in the hotter months like it is now in the UK, it's going to help this silver blend a lot easier. It's only on extreme days like it is today where the boo's running about like low 30s that I would be using a wet bed. It's not often that I use a wet bed at all, but there is a bonus to them, especially like with this silver. It'll help fill in any prep marks, so where we've 1000 or 800 disc the panel off, it'll help fill them up, and it'll also help fill and seal up this repair here where it's been primed and prepped up ready. So that one nice wet coat, when we put the silver over that, it'll take really nicely. Now a common problem with silvers is spraying them at too high pressure. So if you spray silvers at too high pressure, what you'll end up doing is burying the metallics, and the metallics don't stand up properly if they hit the panel at too high pressure. You want the metallics to almost land gently on the panel and not be force fired at the panel. So for the base coat stage, I've got this right down at like 20 psi. Now Reflex Silver, we cameraed this up, the camera match was pretty close, but regardless of that, I ignored the camera for this particular silver because I've done it a lot, and picked the lightest shade. Because by picking the lightest shade, if we put this on and it looks a little too light, then if we increased our air pressure a tiny bit, we could darken this up slightly. So I've got the best of both worlds. I'm starting off with the lightest one to start with, and if I really need to, I could darken it up a tad. But you can see as it's laying down and as soon as it's going on that this is pretty much 99% bang on anyway. And with that clear base coat on there, the wet bed, it's going on nice, it's starting to blend in well, and it'll cover up really easily, as you can probably tell. You know, we've only put a very small amount of base coat on this at the moment, and it's already looking really well covered, and everything is looking good. Now at this stage, again, with it being very hot, that wet bed has obviously dried off, and I want to make sure that with the kind of colour that this is, being a very coarse metallic and it having a lot of metallic in it, that I keep the panel as clean as possible. So I'm making sure between each coat I'm getting rid of any overspray, any metallic particles that are sort of sat on top of the paint surface rather than, you know, as a dry dust. I don't want any of that in the way. Now what I've done there is I've just increased the fluid a little bit, and now I've dropped the pressure right off to 15 psi, and I've just dusted that corner over with a little drop coat just to blend that into that back door a little bit more before I then unmask the next part and we move on to the next bit. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to unmask this section, peel this away, and then I'm just going to quickly do a little bit of prep to the section that we're unmasking, because we need to put some soft foam around where the clear blend is going to be, and also obviously clean it and tack it and make sure everything is right. Now, as we're saying, like, we get this a lot for people who come on training days who struggle with silvers, A lot of people apply silvers too wet, they apply the drop coats too wet, or they apply things at too high pressure. You want to make sure, especially with a colour like this LA7W, the Reflex Silver, or the Ford Moondust Silver, that you're applying it as light as possible. And you can see there, between them two panels, there is a shade difference. Now, this panel that we're tacking, this side has been painted before, which is why I wanted to just blend that in to this little section here, and just do a cheeky little blow in, just to try and help the colour and everything look a lot better, because silvers like this can be a real pain. This Reflex Silver, I find if we use it in the lightest shade, quite often we can almost get an edge to edge on it. Say if we're doing the back doors, we could just edge to edge the back doors normally, but with this side being painted, I've just decided to just blow in the very top bit where my new colours join in their new colour, so to speak, on this part. So I'm just putting a little bit of soft foam around the edge here, so that when I clear, it'll leave a nice feathered edge around there that we can just put a tiny little bit of fade out thinners on, and then when we come to polish it, we can literally run the polish around that edge with no flattening needed, and it'll burn that clear in really nicely around that edge. Last little bit obviously to do is make sure this foam is really firmly pushed on. A lot of these foams have a pressure sensitive adhesive, so you can fit them to start off with and then they fall away quite easily. What you need to do is really push it down hard and make sure that adhesive has stuck well to the panel, because it is pressure sensitive. Now what I'm going to do here, just to help this now with this final little bit of a blend, is just go over this again with the wet bed. So at this point I've not left the booth, I've stayed in the booth. I'm just swapping the reusable cup, because I'm only swapping between the silver and the wet bed. I've just flushed a little bit of the wet bed through the gun. That'll get rid of enough of the silver then that I can put the wet bed down without having to go out and fully clean the spray gun out. I'm just going to give it again another tack. I want to make sure everything's nice, everything's clean. If you saw my previous video on the massive tips for keeping jobs clean, then you'll see how important it is, especially in the warmer months, for tacking things down. The other thing to note is something that I did say in that previous video as well. At the moment, with it being hotter, we are using a slower thinners. So we're using slow thinners at the moment, and I find that slow thinners really massively helps with the laydowns on coarse silvers, gunmetals, things like that. Those kind of colours that are really highly packed with metallics. I find that with the slow thinners, they lay a lot nicer. You get a lot less chance of getting the banding around on silvers, which you see sometimes, where you can see a real dark patch where it's been blown in. But also those dark patches do tend to come from the fact that it's just been done at too high pressure. So at the minute, the clear base we can put on 25 psi, we can put it on up to 2 bar if we want. It's not going to be an issue, because obviously it's just a clear base, so we just want a nice coverage. But when it comes down to putting your silver blends on or your effect coats, you really want to drop that pressure off as low as your spray gun will let you, but still atomize that paint nicely. So in the case of this Bellaria, I was managed to drop this down right down to 1 bar and just under 1 bar. So when I was just feathering this light little blend into that wet bed now, I could keep this nice and light, just just very lightly dust this in, as gentle as I can. It's going to land into that wet surface of the wet bed, which is going to help all the metallics settle and sit up really nice, and everything when you're done should look very nice, even, and obviously be the right colour, and the blends should all look nice and even. Now if you do have any dark spots, then back away a little bit, drop that pressure off and back away, and that will help a lot. Just dust it on, don't go really wet, just go for like a medium wet, almost like a drop coat, and that can really help them metallics stand up, get rid of that dark banding that you see sometimes, and help everything sit nice. So as you see now, as we look across it, everything's even, and I always walk from side to side to make sure that there is nothing obvious that looks off. And obviously, before you get to the clear coat stage, which you're going to go through now, make sure everything is 110%. Now, as I said before, a couple of things I want to stress. So keeping the pressure as low as possible. Your thinner's speed, you don't want to be using anything that's too quick. If it's drying too quick, then the metallics aren't going to be landing on the surface properly, and then again that will affect the colour. And obviously the pressure. Now the pressure that it goes down at is extremely important. If it hits at too high pressure, those metallic particles do not stand up properly, they do not sit right, and that's where those dark banding edges come from. Now the clear coat for this, we're using KAPCI 6030 clear coat. We've got the WS400 Series 1. Really hot day, so the first coat on this is going at around about 3 turns out. It's at 2 bar, and as always 1 3/4 turns open on the fan only. And we're just giving it one nice even wet coat. What we're then going to do is give this around about a 10-minute flash off, just to make sure that everything's flashed off nicely. Excuse the yawn. Just to make sure that everything's flashed off nicely before we then come over with the second wet coat. And then I'm going to turn this right up to full fluid for the second coat. Now I've laid that first coat on, I can already see that everything's nice, my blends are good, there's no dark banding as I walk around it, everything looks good from every angle, so I am more than happy. Now, as I said, it's not often I run a gun at full fluid, but at the moment it's been excessively warm, and this was late in the afternoon during this little mini heat wave that we've got going on. The other lad repaired this up and got this prepped up ready, and I just went in and painted it out of the way, so it's done and finished and it can go out. And it was, I think, around about 35 degrees in the booth by this point. It was getting really late in the day, so hence why I'm running full fluid. Now I'm not going as tight with my overlap, I'm just stretching my overlap a little bit more. I'm almost giving this like a half coat in effect, because obviously at full fluid this is pumping so much out. I'm not doing a really tight overlap and a clean overlap. I'm just giving this quite a, almost like a dusting from a bit further away rather than getting in close and tight. And the main thing that I'm trying to concentrate on here is matching this peel up to the rest of the van. A job like this, if it comes out clean like this one did, then we've got, I think, a couple of nibs on the top of the back door and polish the blends out of this, and it can go out without any polishing work. It can be left gun finish, and that makes our life easier, and obviously it takes a lot less time as well in the shop. So the better you can get your job and the cleaner you can get your job, not just on your colour but on your clear coat side, then the better it is all round. And as I said, if you want to see, oh, you have to excuse me yawning, it is like 1:30 in the morning when I'm editing this. But if you do want to see some more tips for keeping jobs clean, then do look at the previous video, and I will pop up a card in the top left corner, top right corner now for you, which you can click on towards the end of the video if you want to see my tips for keeping jobs extremely clean. Now, what I'm doing here, I'm just pulling off this outer masking. Now, the reason that I'm doing this is that I just want to put a tiny bit of fade out on the ends of the blends, and also around that inner edge. That inner edge, obviously we don't want a lip on there or anything. We want that nice feathered edge from that foam to be melted into the rest of the van nicely and cleanly. So again, when we come to polish, it's just a very quick run over with the 3000 disc and just polish that in. I'm using the Multimix aerosol fade out thinner still. It's been brilliant for me. I've heard 1 or 2 guys having problems with it, and I think that's more just for the fact that the amount that's going on, because I have tested the problems that I've been told about, and I think if you overload any fade out thinner, you get problems. It almost goes like fish iron on your blend, and it's just because you're overloading the thinner, it's going down too wet. Now you can see here we've got a nice match on the peel, so that's good. Now I gave this 2 coats on this day just because it was such a hot day that this was evaporating off extremely fast, and obviously with the airflow of the spray booth, that's only amplified in sort of the flash off. So on this I gave it 1 quick spritz round with the fade out thinner, and then just very quickly gave it a second go around. Now if it wasn't so hot in the booth on this day and it was say in the 20s like it normally is, then I would only give this 1 coat. You'd only need to give this 1. If you gave it 2 on a normal day, it would be too much. As you can see, everything's good, everything's looking nice. We'll have a quick little walk around, but that is it for me for today, guys. So we've got another nice clean job, all the blends are nice, but most importantly this very awkward colour is now perfectly blended into the rest of the van. So that's it for me for today, guys, and I'll see you again soon for the next one. Bye for now.